Hello and welcome to Catch Up with Community Church. It's so good to have you listening to us today. Whether you're a regular member or it's your first time listening, you're super welcome and we hope you enjoy the preach today. So today we have Josh Robinson. It was our youth service at Chafford and he's going to be preaching to us on the last three fruit of the Spirit: faithfulness, gentleness and self-control. It's great. He's in our year 10 plus group, so please give it a listen. You're going to have a great time listening to it and you'll get a lot out of it. Before we get into that though, just a notice to remind you of Wednesday the 3rd of July we have our corporate prayer meeting at Chadwell starting at 7:30 p.m. so do be there. It's great to pray as a church. We see God move, so get there if you can. But now let's listen to the preach.
Morning, church. Excellent. So I've been wanting to do this for a while, actually. So we're going to continue with the Holy Spirit. Typically, we're going to finish this sort of subtopic on the fruit of the Spirit. So I want to recap Galatians 5, verse 22 to 23. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against these things, there is no law. Now, the main ones we're going to focus on today are faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So, let's start. Let's start with faithfulness. So, let's do this by show of hands. Does anybody want to say what they think faithfulness is? Anyone? Anyone? Man at the back.
I suspect it's being loyal to a cause.
Being loyal to a cause. Okay, so does anyone else have something they want to add to that?
I mean, faithfulness is just giving your all to someone you trust.
Okay, so you say trust is a major factor in that? Okay, anyone else?
I believe faithfulness is positive commitment to something.
So positive committing, even when things
Positive commitment to something.
Okay, so even when things go badly, it's still committing positively. Okay, so this is how I would describe it, and I'm going to use 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 6 to 7, and I'm using NLT if anyone wants to follow along. So we are always confident, even though we know as long as we live in these bodies, we are not at home with the Lord. For we live by believing and not by seeing. Now, we can see there that faith is integral to our lives. It's how we live as Christians. And we just simply cannot live as children of God without faith. Now, it brings us to God. The moment we start believing in God, this is the moment the Holy Spirit first enters us. Now, it's also, like I said, believing, but especially without seeing. So even though you may feel alone and abandoned, it's still believing in God and still believing that he will lead you through your life. Now, Jesus said this to Thomas: "You believe because you have seen me, but blessed are those who believe without seeing me." So Jesus wants us to believe in God, even if we can't see him, even if we don't see what he does in our lives. Now, our relationship with God is built on us believing. But at least for me, there is something else that's very important with faithfulness. So to illustrate that, I want a couple people just to demonstrate something. If you just pick 2 youth that haven't been up yet, feel free to give them a big hand. Hello, do you want to say your names for the congregation?
Grace. Elizabeth.
Excellent. Now, feel free to come over here. I'm going to tell you something. So, admittedly, it's raining, and this illustration relies on the hot weather, but it's hot enough in here, so that will pass. Now, so we're going to have an element of trust here. You need to trust that I will have methods of keeping you cool in this room. So I'm going to ask you now, do you trust that I have methods of keeping you cool in this room?
Yes.
Okay, so you have that trust and you believe that I can do that. Okay, you can go now. Not you, no, you can stay, Elizabeth, because we're going to do this again. Ignoring what happened, also thank you, we can have a round of applause for... Now, ignoring what happened there, do you trust and believe that I will have a method of keeping you cool?
Yes.
Right, come over here. You can have this bottle of water. Please don't drink out of that. Here you go. That's a nice pack. You can have this rubbish fan that doesn't really work, and this bigger fan, if you like. Mind you, don't knock someone with that cable. And there you go. You can go and keep cool now. But if I could have those back, actually. Just give them to Akin, he'll take them. Now, there was a clear difference in what happened there. They both had that trust and belief, but they didn't. There was a difference, because with Elizabeth there was a change, and this is what James 2 verse 14 to 17 says. What good is it, dear brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith, but don't show it by your actions? Can that kind of faith save anyone? Suppose you see a brother or sister who has no food or clothing. You say, goodbye and have a good day. Stay warm and eat well. But then you don't give that person any food or clothing. What good does that do? So you see, faith by itself isn't enough. Unless it produces good deeds, it is dead and useless. Now, so with the first one, there was trust and belief, absolutely. But nothing changed. There was trust that they would keep cool, but then nothing happened. What's the point? Okay, believing is very important. I didn't hand Elizabeth all the fans and other things until she trusted. So believing and trusting is very important, but it's not the whole picture. Believing is a choice. We do choose to believe, but it should result in a change in our actions, and that change should completely transform our lives. Otherwise, I feel like we're missing the point. If you believe that I can keep you cool, and then I just send you to sit down, there's no point. Nothing's changed. But if you believe I can keep you cool, and then you get handed all of that stuff, it will completely transform your life. And as silly of an example as that is, this is why faith should change your life, your behavior, your actions, everything. Now, this change should overflow into our relationships. And these relationships are our relationships with our family, our friends, and more importantly, those we're not particularly fond of, our enemies. Now, this could be a bully at school, a manager who treats you badly, anyone who irritates you, to be honest. Faith should change the way you interact with these people. Most importantly, it should change the way you interact for the better. So, to recap, faith a major part of faith is believing in God, even though you can't see him. But for me, there also needs to be, yes, it is the foundation of our lives, but it also needs to have a change as a result. And I mean, what examples of what this looks like is repenting, anything you've done wrong, spreading the good news to people you meet, and loving everyone despite who they are, whether they're an annoying child at school, a difficult colleague, someone who beats you for the 100 millionth time in a game, Dad. And finally, treat people with gentleness. And this leads me quite nicely onto my next point. Let's look at gentleness. I'm going to give you the radio mic again. Is it okay? Brilliant. We're gonna do this again. We're gonna do this again. I don't know if you're gonna pick people at random. If we're gonna do a show of hands, does anyone want to share with them what they think gentleness is?
Being calm.
Being calm. Okay, yeah, that's definitely an aspect. Anyone else?
Gentleness is being meek.
Being meek. Okay, yeah, I think that could play an aspect. I think we got one more. We got time for one more.
Being able to make room for each other's faults.
Okay, yeah, I definitely that's very interesting. Okay, thank you all. Now, I actually think what I noticed there, a lot of you actually struggled to give a definition of gentleness, and it is very difficult to give such a definition, and that's partly because there is a misconception here that I need to address. Gentleness is not being passive or weak. We often think of it as being passive or weak, but nothing could be further from the truth. Gentleness requires patience, self-control, don't worry, we will get there, and humility, and it can be very challenging. So I'm going to have a sort of illustration on this PowerPoint. If you imagine a glass of water, just imagine you're carrying a glass of water across the kitchen. So imagine you're carrying a glass of water across the kitchen. Just think of that process. It requires extreme gentleness. To carry that glass, you need to have a tight grip, and to get it from one end of the room to the other, you need to be slowly walking. If you were a touch overconfident and walking around like this, maybe you had even a bit of pride, or even maybe you were angry at something and you were stomping around in a huff, well, then it would spill, and we'd end up with a mess and a ruined carpet and ruined electronics, and nobody wants that. And that mess can be also quite difficult to clean up. It's virtually impossible to get water in a glass once you spill it. So gentleness is very challenging. It's very challenging to display gentleness. So let's have a look at some examples that Jesus did. So in John chapter 8, there's quite a famous story about a woman caught in adultery. Now, these women were normally stoned under the law of Moses. However, when inquired by the preachers by the teachers of the law, about what should they do with this woman, he responded, let the first one who has never sinned throw the first stone. Then everyone left, because Jesus was the only sinless man. What this means is he had the right to stone the woman, because he had never sinned. He could throw the first stone at the woman and condemn her. But he didn't. Anger could have taken over, but Jesus responded with gentleness. He said, neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. Now, this changed the woman's life. I'm not saying she went and sinned for, never. She never sinned for the rest of her life, because that probably didn't happen, but it completely changed her life. She was about to be killed in quite a painful way, and Jesus said, no, I won't condemn you, even though I have the right to. This is an example of gentleness, and it's our example to follow. If Jesus can change the life of a woman who is condemned to death by showing gentleness, then surely we can do the same in our lives. Now, there's another example I wanted to look at, and that's Jesus' death. Now, his gentleness didn't stop with an adulterous woman. When Jesus was dying on the cross, his very words were, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing, from Luke chapter 23. Now, think about that for a second. Jesus had just forgiven the very men who were brutally killing him. I'm not sure if any of you adults have seen, in depth, how you die on a cross, but it's very graphic and horrific. And Jesus had forgiven these very men. He could have said, Father, strike these Romans with lightning and make their empire collapse in flames. Okay, yes, that's a little extreme, but he had the right to say that. These men were torturing him, whipping him, mocking him, killing him. But he still didn't say that, because he showed gentleness again, and this is one of the most extreme examples of his gentleness. So when people wrong you, no matter how much you've had to endure with them, no matter how much pain they've caused you, no matter how many times they've beaten you at board games, Jesus wants you to show gentleness over anger. Now, of course, this isn't easy. I'm not saying someone's going to crucify you. If that happens, I'll be very concerned. But even when people annoy you, even when a bully at school really starts to irritate you and you just want to hit him, don't. If you respond with gentleness, you can completely alter their life and their perspective. And this is why it is so difficult. And also, it requires a lot of self-control. And while we're on the topic of self-control, this is our last one to discuss. So, let's go again. Does anyone pick someone and let's see what they have to say about it?
Self-control is the ability to control one's emotions.
Okay, so controlling one's emotions and ability to process them so we don't have outbursts of anger. Okay.
Not to allow our emotion to have the better part of us.
Calm temperament.
Can you hold it closer to your mouth?
If like, you know, on the back of what he's just said, not allowing your emotions to take control.
Definitely, okay.
Being calm, even in the face of provocation.
Yeah, I definitely agree. That's brilliant. Thank you.
What else? Okay.
Okay, I think we'll have time for one more. One more? Oh, we'll do two more.
Self-control means to be able to even when you're put in tough situations, you don't let your emotions get the better of you, and you do what you think is right.
Yeah, okay, yeah, no, I agree with that, yeah. Okay, last one.
Self-control is so when someone pushes you, you control yourself.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Well done. Okay, one more.
Self-control means when you're angry, keeping calm when you're angry.
Yeah, okay, I think we'll leave it there. But that is the last bit of questioning I'll do. So thank you to everyone who participated there. That was brilliant. Now, this is the main points I consider when I think about self-control, and they are the main thing is being able to control one's actions, and we've said that already. And this could look like, obviously, being controlling emotions. I actually didn't have that there. I didn't think of that, but it's being able to control emotions is key. Resisting sins and temptation. So when something arises that you want to do, but you know goes against the will of God, trying your hardest to go, no, I will follow the will of God, and not doing what you're tempted to do. It's also being careful with your words, and this is one that we're going to look at in a bit more detail in a minute. This is trying to say things that don't hurt other people, it's not just saying things that won't hurt the people that are listening to what you're saying. But if you're gossiping behind someone's back, that's also not something you should avoid, because if they heard what you said, if it would hurt them if they heard what you said, don't say it. Now, making good use of your time is another big one, and I feel like we don't think about this one too much because our lives are frankly very busy, and when we make good use of our time, this is set not just getting all your homework done or getting all your work done. It's also setting aside time for God and setting aside time for prayer and making sure you're spending time with God. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not sure if you've seen the state of the world, but we're not exactly brilliant at any of this, especially being careful with words. James chapter 3 verse 8 says, people can tame all kinds of animals, birds, reptiles and fish, but no one can tame the tongue. It is restless and evil, full of deadly poison. Now, what this means is, we just can't, try as you might, your flesh just cannot resist temptation. There's only so long, any of you in the room, there's only so long you can go before you give in to temptation. Now, that may vary from person to person, but the same principle is the same. None of us can resist temptation. And as a result, this is one of our biggest weaknesses as children of God. And it can be very, very difficult. Now, this is especially, Jesus knows this, and he said in Matthew chapter 26, he said this to his disciples after he found them sleeping. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. This is quite a famous verse, and he said this to his disciples. They were the closest people to Jesus, and they promised to guard Jesus with their lives. And they couldn't stay awake for an hour. So even they, the people, may I reiterate, were closest to Jesus and closest to God, some of the closest people to God. They struggled, they couldn't control themselves. They struggled really badly with self-control. This is not just a one-off occurrence. This happens regularly throughout the gospel. So if they can't control themselves, then it should come as no surprise that we struggle with this as well. However, there is something. It's not actually about. So there is something we can do about this. I say we. It's not actually about what we do. It's about what God does. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, it says, "My grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. That's why I take pleasure in my weaknesses and in the insults, hardships, persecutions, and troubles that I suffer for Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong." Now, self-control is a major area of weakness. But God will help us. He doesn't just give up on us. He doesn't go, "Oh, that one's gone too far. I can't do anything for him." He helps. He will help you. I can't remember. I can't remember where it is, but God will leave the 99 to find the one that's lost. And when he finds you, he'll throw a massive party. Now, obviously, without God, we won't get very far, quite frankly. We'll hardly get anywhere, in fact. So God will make us stronger than we could ever be on our own. Now, we also need to ask God to help us, and that weakness will lead us to rely on God. But until you ask him to help you, and until you have that faith that he will make you strong, unfortunately, can't do too much. So if you realize one of your greatest weaknesses in self-control, and come and turn to God to help you, then he can make you stronger than you've ever been. Now, that is the end of these 3 parts of the Holy Spirit, but there's one more thing I want to talk about, because this is the end of the fruit of the Spirit section. No, thank you, I'm glad you're awake. I said this is the end of the fruit of the Spirit section. Thank you. Now, I want to talk about one more thing. Let's go back to Galatians 5, verse 22 to 23. "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against these things there is no law." Now, let's have a look at that first bit. But the fruit of the Spirit. Key word, fruit. Not fruits. Fruit. Singular, not plural. Now, many people, including myself, will call it the fruits of the Spirit. Thing is, love is not a fruit. Joy is not a fruit. Peace is not a fruit, and so on. None of them are fruits. They all come together to make one fruit. Now, I think it was Kirsty who said this, but I got it from her. Thank you, Josh, for telling me. Treat it like an orange. An orange is made up of segments. I'm not trying to be patronizing, but an orange is made up of segments. And each of those segments represents the parts of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. They're individual segments, but they all come together to make one orange, one fruit. What this means is you can't just have a few of them and leave out the rest. I know for myself, and I think some people sometimes forget about other fruits, like goodness and gentleness, because they might not see it as much, and like with the misconception of gentleness being weak. But if you miss any of them out, you'll end up with that, and I'm going to tell you now, do you go to the shop and buy half an orange? Who goes to the shop and buys half an orange? What is the point of buying half an orange? You buy a full orange, not half of one. So, what this means is that if you only think you have one of those segments, then you're wrong. You might have more, you will have all those segments. They might be different sizes, They might not match yet. But once again, that's where God comes in. If you ask God to help you grow in the areas you're weak in, if that might be self-control, it might be gentleness, it could be any of them. And you can ask God to help you grow in the areas you're weak in and give you that whole fruit. Because it's not half an orange, it's a whole orange.
I hope you enjoyed today's message. I know Josh did really well, so if you do see him, give him a well done. Let him know how well he did. It'd be great to see you at one of our sites if you've not been to one already. We meet at Chafford Hundred, Chadwell St Mary, South Ockenden and Basildon, Sundays at 10:30 a.m. All the details can be found on our website. Goodbye.